I still believe in like the vision of Chaminade and Marie Therese and Adele.
Yeah.
And like, especially as a woman, like looking up to like Marie Therese and Adele, what examples to follow, you know, because they both were so different, but yet there they were, they came together.
Welcome to Sharing Our Marianist Stories, a podcast produced by the North American Center for Marianist Studies in Dayton, Ohio. I'm Mike Bennett, Media Administrator for NACMS. For this episode of Sharing Our Marianist Stories, I was privileged to sit down with Susan Buckley, a lay Marianist from Dublin, Ireland, who was visiting the United States in the fall of 2023. Some may be surprised to learn that the Marianists have a presence in Ireland, so some introductory history could be helpful. In 1967, free secondary school was introduced in Ireland. Archbishop John Charles McQuaid, Archbishop of Dublin, Ireland, wanted to increase the number of religious-run schools by increasing the number of religious orders, and he therefore sought the support of the Society of Mary in this endeavor. Given the growth the Society of Mary was seeing in the Cincinnati province, Brother John O'Connor was sent to Dublin in February 1967 to lay the foundation for St. Lawrence College, 7 miles south of Dublin. Brothers Robert Kelly and Furman Widmer arrived on August 18, 1967, for the beginning of that school year. With their arrival, the first Marianist community was established in Ireland, which was a foundation of the Cincinnati province. Brother Frederick, who is still living in the Society of Mary's community in Dublin, was part of that initial community and supervised the building of St. Lawrence College. St. Lawrence College began as an all-boys secondary school and soon became one of the first schools in Ireland to have women teachers in an all-boys secondary school. In 1973, the school became one of the first religious-managed co-ed schools in the country. It is distinguished for the family spirit amid all those affiliated with the school, as well as its focus on teaching and learning. The number of Marianists in Ireland has fluctuated over time. Today, there are 4 members of the Society of Mary living in a Marianist community in Dublin. There are also a few lay Marianists and those involved at St. Lawrence College. The Daughters of Mary Immaculate have not had a presence in Ireland. In this episode, Susan refers to MLNNA, an acronym for Marianist Lay Network of North America, which is now called the MLCNA, short for Marianist Lay Communities of North America. The MLCNA is the lay branch of the Marianist family in North America and consists of lay Marianists and Marianist lay communities. She also refers to Cape May, which is the Marianist Family Retreat Center in Cape May, New Jersey, that offers communal retreat experiences in the Catholic tradition. Without further ado, let's turn the floor over to Susan.
My name is Susan Buckley. I am from Dublin, Ireland, and that's where I live. And I am just visiting Dayton, Ohio today. By default, I ended up in St. Lawrence College, which is the only Marianist-run school in Ireland and all of the British Isles. I was due to go to an all-girls Catholic girls' school, and I ended up moving from where I lived in Blackrock to Ballybrack, and I just didn't want to go back, get a bus every single day. And it happened that my cousins were going to St. Lawrence's school I'd never heard of, and it had gone co-ed. The school was started in 1967, and it was all boys until 1973. So basically, as they say, the rest is history. I started in St. Lawrence's in 1976, and my first introduction to Marianists was Brother Frederick, who is still in St. Lawrence College. He was my first class religion teacher, and he is like everything which I later found out about Marianist. He epitomizes all of that. And so he was such a great person to learn from, and he inspired me to stay connected. So when I left school in 1981, although I was part of my parish, it didn't kind of satisfy your spiritual needs. So I would have being part of a small faith community, which was a Marianist small community kind of for 5 years. Then I was part of another one. And I've stayed connected to the Marianists, not so much to the school, although all of my siblings went, all 5 of them went to St. Lawrence's. My 2 grown-up nieces went there and my son went there. So he finished there about 2 years ago and I have a grandniece there now. Living in Ireland in the heyday of St. Lawrence College, parents were part of lay communities and then students who had left were part of lay communities. But kind of as things dwindled over the years and the church has changed in Ireland, there was less and less people. So my connection then was about 17 years ago, I became part of a cyber community, which is Our Lady of the Round Table. And there are people there was a lady from Australia, France, Canada, Africa, and then some women from the States. And that has been like a godsend. But I've also kept in contact with some of the brothers who taught me, or, my principal, or over the years as well. So I've had the opportunity to visit the US, or last year was part of the International Lay Assembly in Madrid, which was, fascinating because there was 98 people from 28 countries, like countries I didn't even know there were Marianists in. And it was a great opportunity to see so many differences, but yet commonality, because differences culturally, also financially, between Africa, Europe, and like North America, and like South America as well. They were all represented. Even though I live on an island, there are still 4 Marianist brothers in Ireland. But I am kind of on my own there. But it's never lonely because now with the internet and Zoom and, you're always connected. And 25 years ago, I actually became a spiritual affiliate of the Marianist. So this year I will celebrate 25 years in affiliate. I definitely think my life would have been completely different had I gone to that all-girls school. It has given me opportunities that I would have had. I was lucky enough 7 years ago to go on a Marianist pilgrimage and visit France and Spain and walk the streets where Chaminade walked, go to visit Adele's house, go to visit Le Pan, where Marie Therese was finally buried, and, go to Saragossa and I can sit in front of Our Lady of the Pillar. And you can understand where Chaminade got his excitement and his vision. I know the story was that he was there on the eve of Our Lady of the Pillar and he saw how fervent the Spanish are, and they still are. Like, if you happen to be lucky enough to be there, I always have that in the back of my mind, that's what Chaminade saw, that it inspired him to go back to France and say, well, that's what I want. So that I've been very lucky in that respect.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's great. That's a really comprehensive experience of the Marianist family, and certainly a testament of lifelong engagement in the Marianist family. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about, you called it a cyber community, or often I hear them referred to as a virtual community. Yeah. Can you talk about logistically what the engagement of that community looks like, and then also how that experience of being in that community has impacted you? So
people that were involved in the community originally were part of the University of Dayton community course program, and they encourage people basically to form a small community. And when they were finished, they didn't want it to stop. So they continued to get together. And I came along kind of probably a year or 2 after they had started, because Dan Jordan passed through Ireland and he saw the situation I was in, and he goes, there might be something there that might fit where you are. So he put my name forward, and at the very beginning, like, you were encouraged to lurk, to see if it fit you. And so originally we would meet. It was very intense. It was 5 days a week. We would do Lectio Divina, and it was all done by email.
Wow.
So regardless of where in the world you were, it didn't matter because you just posted. So we would, what Lectio Divina, you take your word, your phrase, you would write a little bit about what inspired you to use that word, and then you would write a short prayer. So naturally enough, through all of that, we form friendships. And, I think sometimes with the anonymity of email and the internet, you could actually be your best person because there's no preconceived ideas or a quick judgment about somebody. So I think that was one of the benefits. So we did that intensely, probably for about 10 years. And we were lucky enough in 2010 to actually meet in Ireland in person for a retreat. And the brothers were kind enough they had a big house at that stage. And we actually met there. And I moved in there moved up the road from my house for the duration of the retreat. And it actually inspired the brothers because they saw the commitment of lay people. We prayed every morning, we prayed every evening, and then we would join the brothers for Mass. And even when we were finished, we sent each other out and blessed each other. And I think they were taken aback by that sort of commitment. Yeah. So it was good for them to see that even though we're lay people, the commitment is still very strong. The pilgrimage was 6 of the women from our lay community, and then some other brothers joined us. And we were really blessed to have Dave Fleming as our guide, because one of the women in our group is Marcita, his sister.
Oh, yeah.
So she twisted his arm. And that was something you'd never repeat because, like, Dave Fleming is just the encyclopedia of everything Marianist. So to have him on tap for like 2 weeks was just an unbelievable privilege because he is just so involved and in depth, and we learned so much. And he said Mass in Chaminad's bedroom at the table where he wrote his letters. Now we meet once a month by Zoom. So we're doing that, long before COVID came and Zoom was important or came into play. So I think we're doing that probably about 5 years. So we meet on the 3rd Monday of every month, and we have an hour-long Zoom, and we would, have prayer and check in and maybe have an article to talk about it. Part of some of my visits to the States, well, most of my visits have been because of my virtual community, because the friendships I have made over all those years. By going to the international meeting last year was through my involvement with the virtual community as well. But although we're not in person, you're still feeling as connected. I said at the beginning, you had the anonymity. In some respects, you became true friends because of having no hidden agenda. That was one of the benefits. And our prayer life at that time, especially when it was 5 days a week, there was huge commitment. So we just kind of readjusted as the time went on.
Yeah. How has that experience impacted you personally and your commitment to the Marianist charism?
I'm not isolated the way I would have been if there hadn't been the internet. And it was one of the benefits of COVID because the world actually became smaller. You could watch Mass in any country in the world. A lot of stuff from NACMS or ML, NNA were online. So you were able to join in. Time zones were the only thing that went against maybe not doing everything. One of the first things was there was actually the Lay Assembly was online. Now, that would have been something I wouldn't have been able to go to, but I was able to go to it because it was online. And even doing these podcasts, anyone can now be part of it, where before you'd have to live in a place where there were Marianists.
I'm curious if there's an example or two of how your experience of being educated within a Marianist institution really impacted you?
At the time I started school, in our school, it was very much a mix of people. It was people from the local area, but people that came in from outside of the area. It was a mix of those that had money, those that hadn't got money. It was very much like what Chaminade started as the lay community, because he welcomed everybody. And so you had a very round connection with the people that were in your class or in the school. The school's quite small, so people got to know other classes. But it was, in St. Lawrence's, it's always been about the whole person. It's always been very pastoral. It's not just the academics. And so if somebody lost a parent or the whole school would mourn the loss as opposed to just the person. And it's still, to this day, very pastoral and very much about the whole person. Like anxiety now would be a huge issue for young people in Ireland. Mental health would be a huge problem. And they are very much still part of dealing with everything. I was lucky enough when I was in school, there was a lot of Marianist brothers in the school. So you saw their example. Now we're lucky enough to see example through lay members as opposed to, years ago, our example was only through the religious. They certainly lived out the hospitality. You could see their faith and their love for people. And I think that definitely made a huge impact. Mm-hmm. I feel really lucky to have been kind of in that time and place.
I'm curious if you can say more about what the Marianist family looks like in Ireland.
Ireland was Holy Ireland. It was nearly 95% Catholic. Mm-hmm. There was some Church of Ireland, and the church has really taken a bashing. And that's still like very much part of the down of the church. So that's really taken its toll on Catholic faith across the board. And sometimes it's hard to actually be Catholic in Ireland, which is an unusual thing to say. Ireland is definitely not what it was. There are very few small faith communities, like of any description for any organisation. Within the school, the ethos is still there, and the characteristics of Marianist education are still taught. A lot of our youth don't have any religious connection. There is mass within the school at certain times. They'll go to that because that's part of the school. Mm-hmm. That's why, for me, the virtual community and my individual Marianist connections and going to something like the international meeting, or a long time ago, I came here for Continental Assembly. Those kind of things are what feed me. Mm. And that's why to be able to do that from my island has become very important for me.
Yeah.
We're just living in a different world now, I still believe in like the vision of Chaminade and Marie Therese and Goodell.
Yeah.
And like, especially as a woman, like looking up to like Marie Therese and Adele, what examples to follow, because they both were so different, but yet there they were, they came together.
You've mentioned a couple times the International Assembly in Madrid.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what your experience of that was like?
Well, my first thing is hot.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky to be one of the delegates for the MLNNA, because the Marianists who came to Ireland were American. They were from the Cincinnati province. Our connection has always been to the US, and then language definitely has brought us back to the US. So with the MLNNA, it was North America, Australia and Ireland. I'm always been part of that group as well. So it was fantastic. It was a very intense program. The fact that there was so many cultures, we worked very hard, and the international team do fantastic work, especially the fact that they all do it voluntarily. The outgoing team did so well. And I have to say, I give Marcita credit because she was one of the ones that was very much brought them together by Zoom, and all of the team that were going from North America, and we all met. So when we got together, we all knew each other. So we were a team before we went. The fact that Father Andre, the superior general, like, was just one of everybody else, sat among us, participated. You know, there's very few places you would see that kind of interaction, because sometimes a superior general would be put up on a pedestal, and the only reason the FMI superior wasn't there was because they had just had finished their chapter, but she spoke to us on Zoom, and they had translators, which was great for us as well. But they really made us feel at home, and definitely it was an eye-opener in relation to the cultures. And some of the African members would say, sometimes we don't have electricity. And you're going, well, you know, and I'm worrying about the charger on my phone or something, you know, minor. Yeah. So it really kind of made you think. Every region took a turn at liturgy, and we were lucky. We ended up on Feast of St. James, which is a Spanish feast, and St. James is connected with Saragossa, and then there was the voting and stuff like that. So I'd never been part of that, and it's all very structured and very proper, and it's authenticated, and so everybody went away having felt the experience. So it was a wonderful experience. It's kind of when you see something that's greater than yourself, and you kind of see how big our Marianist world is, especially when you're sitting on my island. It's, you know, you can feel that there's no one else there. So seeing something like that is brilliant. And even having the two Dayton perspectives, the San Antonio perspective and Hawaii perspective, just within like the four members of the youth panel, were, you know, eye-opening. It was interesting because it gave a different dynamic to the assembly itself.
What would be a hope that you have for the Marianist family?
The hope would be that we keep growing, that certainly other branches would see the enormous talent and commitment of the lay branch, that they would, in a practical sense, definitely more online stuff in relation to bringing people in, that especially people on the fringes that are not part of an in-person community. That is definitely, for me, that's been a godsend. It's given me the opportunity to stay connected. And connection is one of the biggest hopes. And you never stop learning. The hope is that the connections continues, and that we do supposed to talk. One of failings can be where you talk too much and you keep talking about something that needs to be done, but it's never done. Whereas you see definitely the young people that were there, you know, they're doers. They took the reins when they were asked to step up.
Before we hear Susan's response to our concluding question, I'd like to express our gratitude to Susan for doing this interview with me and sharing a bit of her Marianist story. And I'd like to offer a word of thanks to you, our listeners, for listening to this episode and for your engagement with the North American Center for Marianist Studies. Make sure to subscribe to Sharing Our Marianist Stories wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at This Is NACMS. Now, to wrap up this episode, we return with our final question. We know that the founders corresponded via letter writing. So, if you were going to write a letter to anyone, dead or alive, and be guaranteed a response, who would you write to, and what would be the topic?
My initial communication with the brothers who left Ireland that I'm still friends with now were through letters. And
so you're like, I'm already doing this.
I'm already doing this. Yeah.
Sure.
I love writing letters.
Yeah.
So I still do that. a few years ago, I came to Cape May Point for a women's spirituality retreat. And one of the things was we had to make a greeting card. So on the front of it was "So thankful for you." We had to write the card and send it to somebody who you have always wanted to thank, but never got the opportunity to thank. So for me, that card went to Brother Fred, because for me, that was the seed that was sown that has brought me to this point. It has certainly changed my life for the better.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us and certainly for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.